But the problem here says if a rectangular prism, let's see if you can read that. All right, so if you can't read it, I'll read it for you. All right, so it says if a rectangular prism has a faces with areas of 10, 12, and 30 units squared, what is the volume? All right, so the thing that I'd like to really emphasize here is a rectangular prism. All right, that is a three-dimensional object. And then it says it has areas of 10, 12, and 30 units squared. All right, so area is always square units. So what I'd recommend here is maybe drawing what the shape could possibly look like. So you're working with a rectangular prism, a three-dimensional, a box, if you will. Rectangular prism. Don't be intimidated by that wording. Don't be intimidated by anything. A rectangular prism is just a box. No big deal. All right, so the rectangular prism has faces with areas of 10, 12, and 30 units squared. So to have those areas, maybe one base is 6. Another, a height here would be 5. And then maybe the depth would be something like, because you want 30, so you got to have 6 times 5. And then another area is 10, so you're going to have 5 times 2. So maybe that distance is 6 units, 6 units, 2 units, 2 units, and then 5 units. And now that way, this area is 10, this area is 30, and then you've got another face that has that bottom surface would have an area of 12. So you would satisfy the problem. One area of 10, that's this side right here, 5 times 2, base times height. Another area of 12, that would be the bottom, the base of 2, the height of 6. And then you'd also have the 30. That would be this front surface right here. A base of 6 times 5. The area of a rectangle is base times height. So then it says, what is the volume? Well, the volume, I've communicated with my students, the formula for the volume of a prism, any prism, is capital BH, where capital B stands for the area of the base. So the shape of the bottom here is 12. The shape of the bottom is 12. So you'd have base times height times, I'll use capital H, where capital H represents the overall height of the prism. So the base is 12, showing all the work. The base is 2 times 6, which is a rectangle, times the overall height of the shape, which would be 5. You'd end up with 12 times 5, which would give you 60 units squared. Final answer, 60 units squared. All right, so that would be how you find the volume of this shape. Oh, I'm sorry. I said units squared. I meant to say units cubed. Sorry about that. Volume is always cubic units. Area is always square units. All right. So if you have any questions, call in. 312-738-1060. Chicago students dominate. What we've got is we've got more problems for you. We've got more problems for you, but they're coming from a different, that's the only problem I had from that packet. I've got more problems that are coming from this. It's called cracking the PSAT. It's called cracking the PSAT. All right, so a lot of these problems, geometry is geometry, whether it be you're preparing for a PSAT test, an ACT test, or the GED test. All these problems are the same. Just studying, practicing a little bit of your geometry. So let's go to, in this booklet right here, we're going to go to page 224. This is number 33. All right, as I told you, we're doing geometry problems. We're doing like volume, perimeter, area. We're doing percent problems, and some of the problems might be some basic calculating with fractions, percents, and so forth, multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, different number types. Let's take a look. Keep going. All right, so here's a problem. This is number 33. This is number 33. All right, so 33 says, I'm trying to make it so you can read it here. 33 says if 20% of a number n is 36, what is 0.2% of n? All right. So I know you can't read that, but I'm just reading it for you. If 20% of a number n is 36, what is 0.2% of n? All right, so let's take a look at that. All right, so let's first start off with 20% of n is 36. So you need to solve for n to figure out what 2% of n is. All right, so what I would maybe recommend we do here is I worked with my students. I told them that the part, when you're working with percent problems, the most efficient way that I've learned to do these problems, part is percent times the whole. Part is percent times the whole. So what you could do here they tell you 20%. All right, so you got 20%. You write that as a decimal. 0.2 of a number, all right, is 36. 36 is the part here. I told my students that a lot of times when you see that word is, that's some of it a giveaway that's just part of the whole. And then here of is a giveaway. 36 is the small part, and when you see is, and then the of is a giveaway that you're talking about the whole. Of whole is part. So is 36, you multiply 20% of a number n is 36. So we put the 36 there, and you don't know the whole here. You don't know the whole. So what I'd recommend you do here is rewrite this as an equation. 36 is equal to 0.2x. Now you're solving for x. Actually, what I should do is I should use the letter n just to be consistent. All right, use the letter n. All right. So now you divide by whatever's next to what you're solving for on both sides. Divide by 0.2 on both sides. All right. So now what you have is you have to be able to now divide 0.2 into 36. Into 36.0. Bring the decimal straight up. This is one of the things that I did with my students. Rather than use a calculator, I encourage my students to do all of this by hand. Bring the decimal over 1, forcing you to bring that decimal over 1, bringing the decimal straight up. How many times does 2 go into 3? One time. 1 times 2 is 2. You subtract. Bring down one number. How many times does 2 go into 16? 8. 8 times 2 is 16. You subtract. Subtract, you get 0. You bring down one number, 0. How many times does 2 go into 0? That's 0, and you end up with a 0 remainder. 0 remainder. So n is 180. All right? So it says if 20% of a number is 36, what is 2%? All right, if 20% of a number is 36, what is 2% of n? All right, so now you're still not done because you got to figure out what 2% of this 180 is. What's 2% of this 180? So let's set up another problem, or excuse me, 2%. I meant to say 0.2%. So we have 0.2% of 180. 0.2% of 180. Now you've got to figure that out. So what I'd recommend you do is write this same relationship that I wrote earlier. Part is equal to percent times the whole. All right, so now the part, you don't know what it is now. 0.2% of, remember we said of represents whole. All right, so 2% of 180 is what? You don't know what it is. That's what we're trying to figure out. Is what? So now the percent is 0.2. Let's turn the 0.2 into a decimal. Move the decimal over 2 decimal places. You get 0.002. The decimal was here. You moved it 2 to the left. The whole is 180. The whole is 180. So now, again, what I'm asking you to do is do that by hand. Do that by hand. Don't need to use a calculator. You don't need to use a calculator all the time. So we get 180 times 0.002. Notice how when you're multiplying, you don't need to line your decimals up. The decimal for 180 is here, but you don't need to line the decimals up here. So you just multiply normally. 0, 16 carry the 1, you get a 3. 0, 0, 0 when you multiply zeros. And then you multiply that 0, 0, 0, 0. You end up with 06300. You got no decimals up here in the top number, 3 decimals there in the bottom number. So total, that's at 3 decimal places. You move 3 decimal places here, and you get a final answer. Let's just put it in here somewhere. 0.36. Final answer.